Hello everyone, thank you for joining us for this program, Hiking the Oregon Desert Trail. I'm Laurel Westendorf. I'm part of the Community Relations team at the Deschutes Public Library. Every month we explore a theme in our programming, and this month's theme is desserts or desert, whichever you choose. Check out more of this month's programming on our event calendar, found at deschuteslibrary.org/calendar, or you can find recordings of programs on our YouTube channel. Our presenter is Renee Patrick with the Oregon Natural Desert Association, or ONDA. Renee joined ONDA in 2015 to further develop the Oregon Desert Trail, and she's responsible for establishing the 750-mile trail, shaping its future, and inspiring others to get out and explore the high desert as much as possible. In addition, Renee leads ONDA's independent stewardship program and is working to educate and inspire others to experience our desert landscapes responsibly. Thank you so much, Renee, for telling us about what it's like to hike on this trail and maybe some desserts to find on the way.
Great, thanks, Laurel. Let me get my presentation started here. Okay, well, as Laurel mentioned, we're here to talk about the desert and desserts. I'm going to do both. So thank you for joining me today to learn more about the Oregon Desert Trail. I don't know about you, but I love the sweet views that come when I'm on a backpacking trip in Eastern Oregon. Oh, wait. We're here to also talk about the desert. So let's do that again. Welcome to the Oregon Desert Trail. I'm going to talk about this 750-mile long route that hits the highlights of the high desert in Eastern Oregon and some sweet spots too. So some of those places that this long distance route goes through is Steens Mountain, the Heart Mountain National Antelope Refuge, and the Owyhee Canyon lands. Now, this is a project of the Oregon Natural Desert Association, and this organization has been around for over 30 years, focused on high desert landscapes to protect, defend, and restore them for current and future generations. So some of the ways we do that are through stewardship. So normally in a non-COVID year, we would lead group stewardship trips. Often they involve removing fences that might hamper animal migration, or if those fences need to stay, we will replace the barbed wire on the top and bottom with smooth wire. We also do a lot of animal monitoring of animals like the greater sage grouse, which is an important key indicator species in the high desert. So if we can protect the habitat for the sage grouse, we're also protecting habitat for hundreds of other species in the area. And then we do a lot of riparian work, so planting trees in some of the creeks and river areas, all in an attempt to retain more water and make these areas more climate resilient to things like drought that we're seeing right now. And then this year, as a response to COVID and the fact that it hasn't been a good idea to gather large groups of people to do our stewardship work, we've launched the Independent Steward Program. So through this, we try to match you according to your skills and interests to projects across the desert, things like wildlife monitoring, riparian monitoring, trail work on parts of the Oregon Desert Trail and beyond. So you can find more information about our Independent Stewards program on our website if you're interested. So at the heart of all of this, developing a long distance hiking route of our stewardship program, we believe to know Oregon's high desert is to love it. And once you spend a day, a week, or even a month and a half or 2 months hiking the entire route, you'll see the value in these intact landscapes and want to join us in our efforts to protect and restore them. After I've spent almost 6 years now exploring Eastern Oregon in a very intimate way, I really believe it's an incredible opportunity to develop your personal connection to these landscapes. And so to realize that we are part of these places, the health of these rivers and landscapes directly affects our health. So I think that's a really important thing that can come out of hiking or stewarding these places. So I'm going to go over a timeline of our development of the Oregon Desert Trail. It's still relatively young. recreation opportunity. So in 2010, our former executive director had the idea to connect some of the highlights of the high desert, not only the geological wonders of places like Steens Mountain and the Alvord Desert, but the places we've been working for decades to protect, with a route. So to introduce people on foot to these places firsthand, to see the type of things that we're getting up to. And so over the next few years, our hundreds and thousands of hours went into identifying and inventorying this proposed route. And so ONDA looked at the landscape and tried to identify what's existing, where are there trails? Turns out there's not a lot of existing trails in Eastern Oregon. So then we looked to roads, and there are a ton, miles and miles of dirt roads, 2-track roads, roads that probably haven't been driven on in a very long time, that cross the desert. So these could be the path of least resistance through the landscape. And then what are areas we should avoid? So are there sensitive wildlife areas for animals like the sage grouse, or other cultural areas that we should avoid, trying to respect the tribal ties to those places? And so this is our first Oregon Desert Trail coordinator, Jeremy Fox, and he got to do some of the fun part in getting out on the ground, hiking, documenting everything that he found. And lots of volunteer hours went into that as well. And so what emerged from this process is a trail that isn't quite a trail. I call it a virtual route. And so of the 750 miles, about 9% is actual trail tread. 35% is cross-country hiking, so hiking without trails, roads, signage. And the other, about over half, are roads. Again, mostly these dirt roads, but some is pavement, mostly in and out of towns. And there are no trail markers. So what that means, it's something for experienced backcountry adventurers if they want to attempt it all. But there are lots of sections on those places we have trail that are great if you just want to get your, get a taste, a sweet taste of what you might experience out there. So I'll go into more of that later. So in 2013, we found the perfect extreme adventure to hike the route for us for the first time. Sage Clegg is a triple crown hiker, meaning she's hiked all long distance trails, most of the long distance trails in the United States. She's even created some routes of her own. So she went out with all the data that had been collected to see, does it work? Are there any gaps? What do we need to do to make this viable for the greater public? And so there's a great video you can watch on YouTube, or you can find it on the ONDA website, called Sage Steps, 800 Miles on the Oregon Desert Trail. So Wahoo Films, which is a local film company, filmed a lot of Sage's hike. And so it goes into more detail about what she experienced out there, and also why ONDA put something like this together. So in 2014, after Sage hiked, ONDA released a guidebook and map set to the public. And that year we had 3 hikers complete the entire route. Now, I said it was unsigned, so you'll see they had to bring their own sign, and that was before the current logo we have. So it was very much a DIY hike experience. But all 3 were successful in completing the entire route. So it was a great sort of truthing moment for these materials. In 2015, we had 1 hiker complete the whole route, but in a way, this was almost the most important hike to date, because Huck Finn, which is his trail name, hiked the entire 750 miles with just a map and compass. So that meant the materials that have been developed were adequate enough for someone to be successful out there without the use of a GPS device or smartphone app. So I was hired at the end of 2015 to be the trail coordinator. And then in 2016, we had 5 completion hikes, and I created 5 new trail resources. So some of those hikes that year were very notable. This is Christoph Tuscher, who ran the entire route in 19 days and 17 hours. Very incredible, especially because it was in July when temperatures were well over 100 degrees. He had his reasons for doing it in July. He's a teacher at PSU in Portland and only really had summers, and had also trained and attempted it the year before. Anyway, he has a really funny video series about his attempt on his website, christophtuscher.com, that if you're curious, I'd recommend you check out. Then we had Mary Quart, she has hiked a lot of long distance trails. This is Mary water caching, so I'll talk about that later, but she was putting out water for herself before her hike, so she completed the route. And then this couple came out from Colorado. The hiker on the left, Adrian, this is his first long distance trail, which is very impressive because it isn't a trail and it's incredibly challenging. But a fun note, Adrian entered his first ultra run this year, the Leadville 100, and won it. So very impressive. And I'd like to think the Oregon Desert Trail maybe helped pave his way to winning one of the hardest races in the country on his first try. And then I hiked it that year. So I was the 10th hiker to complete the whole route, and I did it in 5 different sections throughout the year. And so I'll take you through some of my hike and what I experienced. So starting in late May, I did a 255-mile section, and you'll see the blue line is the original Oregon Desert Trail as it was designed. And then the different colors that come up are alternates that I made. And so you'll see the red line going down into McDermott. And this was an alternate I made because hikers told me it had been difficult to get into town. And so the original route went about 9 miles north of McDermott, and you would either need to hike the highway or hitchhike, which many people weren't successful in getting rides. And if you've spent a week out in the wilderness, you'll know a shower, a meal, or 5, a bed is very important, and you will definitely need to go to town. So I thought I wanted to make it easier for people to get in and out of towns like McDermott. Then I hiked east through the Trout Creek and Oregon Canyon Mountains, through the community of Denio, through the Pueblo Mountains, and up through fields to the southern end of the Alvord Desert, where my feet had just blown up with blisters. I had crazy blisters, and I was looking at a 5,000-foot climb from the Alvord Desert up to the top of Steens. So I decided to hike smarter and not harder, and I skipped around to French Glen to continue my hike east through the Heart Mountain National Antelope Refuge and down into Plush. So I was really thrilled to find plenty of water and even snow. This is Louse Canyon, which are the headwaters of the Owyhee River. It was very lush when I started the hike at the end of May. This was my first campsite, looking down into the McDermott Valley and into Nevada, just stunning views right from the beginning. This was a very scary storm that I encountered east of French Glen. At this point, I was the tallest thing on the landscape, and I was shaking under my tarp, just waiting for the lightning storm to go by, when I peeked out to notice like the setting sun had set the sky on fire. It was just this gorgeous sunset just after I was wondering if I would make it through. So just the lows and the highs are very close together in some of your experiences out there. So in July, I returned to the headwaters of the Owyhee and began the next leg. I hiked 34 miles and pack rafted 141 miles through the Owyhee. I was also curious to explore other ways of recreating along the trail. And because I'd been a paddler, a pack rafter for a number of years, I wanted to see you paddle the Owyhee River. Often some years it doesn't even have enough water to raft, but with a pack raft, it's small and light enough I could pick it up and walk around hazards or low water places if I needed to. But I wasn't sure, so I was prepared to hike it all if I needed to, but I was hoping I could float some of it. And you'll notice the yellow in the bottom right corner. This was a small alternate that avoided the most narrow part of the West Little Owyhee, which is basically a slot canyon. I had heard it was very challenging, so I went on an alternate way to get in. Now, because I was doing this trip solo and adding a very risky sport of boating, I wanted to be very careful. I spent a lot of time going over my gear, my safety protocols. I carried an inReach satellite device. But in addition to my backpacking gear, I also had a boat, a helmet, a paddle, a PFD. That all added up to a very heavy pack. So this is what I encountered when I got into the West Little Owyhee. So on the left, you'll see there were a couple hundred yards maybe of deep water. And if I didn't have my boat, I would be swimming this. So hikers, if they do decide to go through section 21, they will swim. I do now have an alternate where you can walk the rim and don't have to do as much swimming if you don't want to, but it's an incredible experience if you want that kind of challenge. And then in the middle picture, I encountered gravel bars and thick stands of willow where I would need to pick my boat up and push my way through. And then on the right, there were times where the whole canyon would be choked with rocks, and I would have to inch my way up and over to find a way through. And my mantra became one step at a time and don't get lazy, because I knew the minute I wasn't paying attention to where I put my next footstep, then I could, slip or fall. I just had to be very present and very engaged with every step in this place. And then there were places like this where I had to lower my boat on a rope and then down climb to get into it in order to go forward. So it was very slow going. This particular day, I spent 13 hours moving and I only made it 7 miles. And to give you some perspective, I also hiked a 40-mile day on the Oregon Desert Trail. So 7 miles, 40 miles, similar time frame. But then I got to the confluence with the main Owyhee River at a place called 5 Bar, and I saw there was current. So again, I wasn't sure there would be enough water to even do the main Owyhee River. But when I saw that it was flowing, when I got to this section, I thought, I might actually be able to do this. There were still hazards. So this section between 5 Bar and the small community of Rome has a number of large rapids. This is Widowmaker Rapid, which is a class 5, the highest class you can go. And it was just simply not enough water to get through the boulders. And I'm not a class 5 boater anyway, so I knew I would be slowly picking my way through. So this particular rapid took about an hour and a half to get through. So to give you some more perspective of what a pack is, it's a lightweight inflatable boat. And there's a dry suit zipper on the back. So I store all of my gear inside these long dry suit or dry bags, which I fit into each tube of the boat. And then I inflate it with a sil nylon sack. So I scoop air and push it in. And then I had a dry bag to keep my snacks and things that I wanted access to during the day. So it's a really smart way of carrying your gear and also getting down some remote rivers where you need to hike in. To be honest, most of the main fork of the Owyhee was spent like this. So I could just lay back, the water was calm, and still, granted, there were still a number of rapids. Most of the class 3 rapids had enough water to paddle through, but long stretches between where I could just lay back and enjoy the incredible geology around me. So this is the end, the eastern terminus of the Oregon Desert Trail at Lake Owyhee State Park. And the end is on that rock jetty you will see in the photo at Indian Springs Campground. So whether you hike to the end or, like I did, paddle to it, this is one of the terminuses you'll encounter. So then in September, I returned to Plush, where I finished my hike in June, to hike back towards Bend, 275 miles. And the 2 alternates I hiked here were through the town of Lakeview and through the town of Christmas Valley. Then I had a small little gap near Bend because I needed to meet people for my last little stretch, but I'll talk about that in a few minutes. So this was one of the water sources I had. This is, again, a fall hike where water is much less available. And you will come to understand that any water is good water in the desert, and you need to be willing to do what it takes to drink that water. So this is not lemonade mix, this is the water. So often I would filter it through my t-shirt to get chunks out, then filter it through the water filter, then maybe add a chemical treatment, and then maybe add lemonade. There's some, again, these traces of indigenous communities that have been living there since time immemorial. There are petroglyphs, you'll find arrowheads, hunting blinds. It was really stunning to come across these when I was out. Then the route goes along one of the largest fault block mountains in the country. This is Abert Rim, and you're walking the edge of it, and you can see the valley below, which is 2,500 feet below where you're standing on the rim. Then you get to V Lake, which is the start of the Fremont National Recreation Trail. This is the eastern terminus. This is a 135-mile long national recreation trail, and the Oregon Desert Trail uses about 60 miles of it. So there's trail, there are trees, there's water, there's markers. So if you're looking for a section to get started, this is a fabulous one to check out. These are the National Recreation Trail markers. So there's assurance markers to tell you that you're on a trail. There's some beautiful geology. This is the canyon of Honey Creek. So it was just starting to see the start of fall in the aspen groves there. And there's just stunning landscapes. This is the transition zone between desert and forest, and you have wide views out east into the more desert regions, but still with some of the shelter of trees, ponderosa pines and such. So this is a shot of the alternate that I hiked into Lakeview. So there's another national recreation trail, the Crane Mountain National Recreation Trail, which I hiked south and tied into a trail system that goes right into the heart of Lakeview. So this is at the junction. And this is hiking the trail down right into the middle of town, which is a fabulous way because you know there's going to be food and laundry soon. So this was going up the other side, looking back at Abert Rim, where I'd been a few days before. So the perspectives you get on the Oregon Desert Trail are incredible because there's not much to block your view there. Again, wonderful views, really showing you the transition, the desert and forest transition zone. And then the last few miles into the next town of Paisley are along the Shewakin River. So this is a paved road walk. This is actually a river that's included in Senator Wyden's legislation for wild and scenic river protection. So we're very hopeful that soon this will be a new segment of wild and scenic river. And then food. So a lot of through hikers and hikers think about food a lot. I am no exception. This was a lovely breakfast I had at the Homestead Cafe. Unfortunately, that cafe has since burned down, but it also was a chance to cross paths with the two hikers, Adrian and his girlfriend, who were out, Nikki, who is out hiking. So it was fun to hear their stories. They were going the opposite direction. So we got to share tips about what we encountered. And we would both be seen from the other direction. So this next section, I was going up and over Diablo Rim, which if you've driven to Summer Lake, this is on the east side. It's the ridge you'll see on the east side of Summer Lake. Of course, I had to pack out pizza from the Pioneer Saloon, which makes a great pizza. So that makes great trail food the day after. And I took the opportunity to take a few selfies. This is up on the Diablo Rim, and that point under my knee is Diablo Peak. So this was just, I was starting to get some weather. It actually made for very dramatic hiking. And this ridge drops about 1,000 feet to the desert below towards the east. And I had the great pleasure of seeing what I thought at first were pronghorn. As I was approaching, they ran right off the edge of the cliff. And I soon saw they were actually bighorn sheep that were perched right under the rim edge that I was looking over. And this is one of the road walks. So when I talked about roads and sometimes dirt roads, this is a taste of what that means. It's really I don't mind a road walk, especially like this. And again, it gets you where you need to go. And especially because you need to be so attentive and pay attention on the cross-country sections. Sometimes it's nice to have a few miles where you can just walk and know this road will take me where I need to go. Then I entered the town of Christmas Valley, which is a small little desert community. And then on the other side, went through Crack in the Ground. So this is part of the Christmas Valley alternate. And Crack in the Ground is a trail that goes through a fissure in the earth. At points, it's a couple 100 feet deep, and there's a trail either through the middle or on the side. It's a very cool feature, and it's often like an air conditioner. So if you're on a hot day, this will keep you cool and dry down in the crack. And then I had to skip those few miles to meet up with some friends, and they hiked the last 9 miles of the Oregon Desert Trail, which are in the Badlands Wilderness, just 15 miles east of Bend. And again, I had to bring my own marker. So I had my coffee cup with the sticker on it to mark the western terminus, which is the Tumulus Trailhead in the Badlands. So then in October, I went back and hiked those 13 miles that I had skipped because you want to connect your footsteps. That's the whole idea behind hiking. Through hiking is hiking every footstep from one end to the other. And then in November, I went back to the Steens and hiked 66 miles to complete the whole route. This time, instead of hiking eastbound, I started in French Glen so that I could go down the 5,000 feet to the Alvord Desert instead of climb up like I would have had to do earlier in the year. So you can tell this is early November. They had already encountered some snow, and you do not want to be up there when the weather is bad. The 3 inches of rime ice on the back of the sign is a real indicator for how extreme and just dangerous the weather can be. So you really learn the lesson that you are not in charge out there. Nature is in charge, and you need to read her cues. So at this particular day, I waited till about noon to climb up, and the snow had softened a bit. And that was important because I needed to kick some steps in to get down to the steep descent to Wild Horse Lake. But it was well worth the wait. It was very stunning to have fresh snowfall and a little bit of coverage to really highlight the rim rock and just the beautiful nature of these places. So this is taken the next day. By the end of the day, I was soaking in Alvord Hot Springs, and I camped at the hot springs at the base of Steens Mountain. And then the next day, I hiked south along the Alvord Desert, and I was able to look back to where I had just come from the day before. Pretty incredible. And then I got to Borax Hot Springs, which was where I had stopped because of blisters earlier in the year. And essentially, I had completed the entire route. I still had to hike back to field, so I had some bonus miles in there, but I officially connected my steps at Borax Hot Springs. So after my hike, I came back and I reflected on all of my experiences, all the alternates I wanted to see. Did they work? Were these good ideas? And I made a couple more resources, and that next year we had 6 people get out and hike the entire route. And then since then, we're up to 40. So a lot of people have been successful, but it's important to know we are the small minority of people who go out there. There are hundreds that go out for a day hike or a weekend or a week. You do not have to hike all 750 miles, but you're welcome to. So I want to get into some top reasons why you would want to hike the Oregon Desert Trail. It might be daunting after what I explained, but there's some really good reasons to head out there. The solitude. So if you enjoy backpacking and have spent any time on the Pacific Crest Trail lately, which is a very popular long distance trail in Oregon, it is hard to find solitude. So there's so many people that are discovering backpacking and love it. That is not the case in Eastern Oregon. You can still find a lot of solitude if that's what you wish. The uninterrupted night sky. So some of the darkest night skies left in the country are in Eastern Oregon. There's simply no light pollution to dilute the stars in the Milky Way. And there are, in fact, efforts out now to help designate this as by the International Dark Sky Association. It's a great place to go for nighttime photography, and it's just incredible stargazing. There are hot springs. There are a lot of hot springs out there, both developed hot springs. So this is the Elvor Desert. There's also Summer Lake Hot Springs, Hunter's Hot Springs, Heart Mountain Hot Springs, and then there's undeveloped hot springs too, a lot of them found within the Owyhee Canyon. So if you like to soak away the soreness after a long day or just wash off, the hot springs are a good thing to plan in to your trip. And then there's wildlife. We have the pronghorn antelope, which is the fastest land mammal in the Western Hemisphere, and also our logo. So the pronghorn, I like to say you'll see more pronghorn than people. And that's a real asset, I think, in this day and age, especially as Central Oregon is growing and growing, to be able to go and see more wildlife than people. History. So I touched on this, but this is homelands of the Northern Paiute tribes, also the Fort McDermott tribes, and some of the area is called home from the Warm Springs tribes. So these people have lived here since time immemorial. There's actually the oldest dated traces of humans in North America in this area, a place called Paisley Caves. They've found human poop dated to over 14,000 years old, and there's yet unverified evidence over 16,000 years old. And so you will come across these traces on petroglyphs and arrowheads, like I mentioned. So it really helps put things in context when you're hiking and you imagine people who were living here many, many, many thousand years before your hike. And then the geology. So I mentioned Abert Rim is one of the largest fault block mountains in the country. Steens Mountain is considered one mountain that's 50 miles long and is also a fault block mountain. And then you have places like the Badlands Wilderness, again, right outside of Bend. These formations were formed by Shield volcano, and fingers of lava spread slowly through the desert. And then as they cooled, they cracked open. And often you can hike right through the crack and get views out to the Cascades. So just really interesting things to look closely and explore. And then freedom, because most of the Oregon Desert Trail is public lands, and it's a route without any real restrictions of you have to be here, you have to be there. I really like to encourage people to see it as a suggestion of travel. And if you can look at the maps, look at the topo maps and see, oh, this canyon looks interesting, or this peak looks interesting, we encourage you to go hike it. If it's on public land and you know how to read the map and get there, please explore. Most of the 40 of us who have hiked have gone slightly different ways in areas. We're just following our curiosity. So I think that's a real asset of a trail or a route like the Oregon Desert Trail. And finally, the desserts. There's just these sweet, beautiful candy colored sunsets, but there's also real sweets you can get out there. So here's a few spots that I'd recommend. In Christmas Valley, the Lakeside restaurant has these huge cookies, like the size of a dinner plate, that you can get, called the Lakeside cookie. They also have like 10 different kinds of milkshakes there. If you're in Lakeview, the Happy Horse Deli is known for their M&M brownies, which are quite delicious. If you're in French Glen and you book a room at the French Glen Hotel, or you just join them for dinner, they do a family style dinner, and they have lots of different desserts, but I've really enjoyed the pie I've had there. And then in Fields is known for their milkshakes. So after you hike down the Steens and through the Elvord, or you can just drive there and have one of their fabulous milkshakes. And then on the eastern side in Jordan Valley, they're known for their ice cream at the Rock House coffee shop. So just a few ideas of where to get some treats while you're out exploring the desert. So now let's talk about some challenges. As you may have guessed, a lot of this terrain is very remote. Eastern Oregon doesn't have a lot of paved roads. There is not a lot of healthcare access or just anyone that could help if you get a flat tire. So this is really important to know before you head out. And it takes something, a safety device like a satellite beacon. I use the InReach, or there's a spot device. But it's worth knowing there is a fair amount of cell coverage if you use Verizon. But just take that into account as you're planning your trip. Water. Water is probably the biggest challenge to hiking out east. And it's not just that you're drinking out of sources that were developed for cattle or rangeland animals. It's the quality of the water that you might be forced to drink. But know that there are springs, there are clean creeks and rivers to drink from. But it's just worth knowing that any water in the desert is good water, and going in with that attitude. There's also, you may want to cache water in certain places. So I've developed a water caching guide and some suggested caching spots. So this is putting water out for yourself ahead of time. For this particular cache, this was when I was going up and over Diablo Rim, I carried 3 gallons of water. We now actually have trail supporters caching water before and after Diablo Rim, which is one of the driest sections on the trail. So we're trying to find solutions to some of those, but depending how many miles you hike a day, how much water you like to drink, how hot it is, you may want to pack out some water for yourself. Another challenge is navigation. So especially where there is no trail, you need to be comfortable with reading a topo map, using a compass. I always want people to take actual paper maps. I have a lot of important notes and helpful hints on the maps that we've created, but also know that GPS devices and smartphone apps are incredibly useful too. I use the app Gaia GPS, so at any point I can pull it up and it's a reassurance like, okay, I am where I think I am, or I need to go a little bit farther to get to this water source. So it's good to use all the tools available to you to stay safe out there. So this is an instance of cross-country hiking, and this is not all cross-country hiking is challenging. There is a 1,000-foot cliff on one side, so there's really only one place to go, and some of the geological features guide you. As well, the West Little Owyhee Slot Canyon is cross-country. You were in a canyon, you were only going one way. So not all the cross-country terrain is extremely challenging. And then weather. So this is the high desert, meaning that the elevations range from 3,000 to 10,000 feet. There can be snowfall any time of year, and it's a colder desert more often than it is a hot desert. So those are important to know when you're packing. You definitely always want to bring warm layers, even in the summer. We have had people get snowed out, even in September, of places. And there are mountain ranges. Our route goes through about 7 different mountain ranges. So you're often up around 7,000 or 8,000 feet. And because we go over Steens Mountain, which is 10,000 feet, you will have snow even in the summer. So you can expect some snow travel even through July. But never fear, we have a lot of resources to help you get out there, be safe, be successful, and have a great time. So I'll run through some of these. We have maps, a guidebook, a data book and water chart, water cache guidelines and maps, downloadable GPS waypoints and tracks, a town guide, trail conditions document, a trail register, and hiking logs. All of these things are free and are available on our website. A lot of them are PDFs that you download and either print at home or save to your phone. So we want to make it accessible and open to anyone that wants to explore. So we've taken the 750 miles, and broken them down into 25 sections. And these sections are between 20 and 40 miles each. So each section start and end, you can drive to most of them. So you can take smaller bites of the long distance trail and break it up some if you like. The guidebook is broken down into 2 sections. The first section is more of a know before you go. So we talk about encountering private land, leave no trace principles, kind of what to expect before you go. And then we also give you sort of an overview of the public lands. So again, we are a conservation organization. So we want to help people learn more about both the agencies who manage these landscapes and the different types of public land that are out there. So there's some wilderness, there are areas of critical environmental concern, there are wilderness study areas. So we try to break that down and explain all those. And then as you're hiking in the maps and in the guidebook, we have indicated all of those. So you'll see quite a bit of the route travels through wilderness quality lands, but not all these lands have permanent protection. So, this is the first step in helping you understand what is out there, and then joining us in some of our efforts to seek permanent protection or help remediate or help protect some of the wildlife out there. So this is another section in our guidebook. Then we get into more of the play-by-play. So we have an overview map. So this is all the maps in that section as they relate to each other. And then almost waypoint by waypoint, a narrative of what you'll encounter. And then, as I said, we explain some of the wilderness, like the Oregon Badlands Wilderness, and we have interesting plant and animal information too included throughout the way. This is a picture of our maps. So we have waypoints on the map. We show the distance between the waypoints. We have the type of tread. So cross country is a different color than a primitive road, which is a different color than trail. We have water sources. So water sources are all included on the map, different notes, campgrounds, and different land designations and private land. So it's important to know when you're on public and when you're on private land. And so we show all of that very clearly on the maps. And then as a companion, we have this water chart, data book and water chart. So from waypoint to waypoint, in an easy to read chart, you can figure out the distance between waypoints, the mileage in the section, what type of surface that is there a notable landmark, and then water details. And then we have water availability if that source has been visited back to 2011. So this is helpful because it's also a Google Sheet. So if you use a smartphone, you can use the sheet, Google Sheet on your phone. When you get to a water source, you can update it, like September 8th, this water source had water. And then if someone's behind you, a week or two behind you, they'll know that they can rely on that source. And so over time, we can see the picture of water availability. So yes, this year with 2021, that's 10 years of water data for all the water sources. Then this is a copy of our water cache guidelines. So I worked with the Bureau of Land Management to put these together. At the heart of it is leave no trace. If you put something out into the desert, you need to take it out with you and also hide it. So a couple of hikers have had water caches go missing because they did not hide it. It's important to know there are other users in the high desert, hunters, rock hounders, ranchers, stargazers. There are a lot of people who use and recreate in the desert. So it's a good idea to hide it. But these cache guidelines are available on the website, and then you can email me for the actual locations where we suggest you can cache water or where our trail supporters are caching water for people. And then we have the waypoints. So again, it's really great to upload this information to Google Earth. I found there's incredible detail now in Google Earth. So you can explore the track and get an idea of a section. So you're just going to do a week. Go in deep, go zoom in close into Google Earth, and you can see a lot of detail and get an idea of what the terrain is like before you even go out there. And then you can upload it to an app like Gaia GPS, again, to have that other resource. And again, I encourage people to use everything we have. It's all meant to be used together to keep you safe out there. Then we have a town guide. So I've put together a town guide of what you can expect to encounter in each community. So that's from food, laundry, hotels, shopping, trail supporters, or we call them trail angels, and other interesting things you can find in the area. And that's important to know because you get to a place like Plush, the Heart Mountain store is really the only thing in town, but this is your gas station, your post office, your resupply spot, your bar, your restaurant, it's everything. And it closes. And if you get there after hours, you're going to have to wait until morning, and there's no cell phone reception there. So the town guide will help you figure out all these things and figure out your resupply strategy, what you can get where, if you're out for long stretches. And finally, we've put together multi-sport stuff. So I mentioned the paddling. Sage Clegg actually biked a couple 100 miles of the trail. She was our first hiker. I've indicated where you can horseback ride, where you can do all of these things. And in fact, we have biking alternates for the whole trail. So if you'd rather bike through some of that, and we've avoided the sensitive places, the wilderness places, so now you can bike it if you so choose. And we want people to get the skills they need because it is a challenging route. So we put together a skills progression. So these are a list of ideas of how you can work up to hiking something like the Oregon Desert Trail in large sections and being comfortable on cross-country sections. So on the right, each section has a skills rating. So I've rated each of the 25 sections on the terrain, the navigation, and the water availability. So you can hopefully quickly find a section that fits your needs and then maybe work up from there. And so this is another example of how I've outlaid the different multi-sport options, and you have a helpful elevation guide too. And this is all in the guidebook. So how can you help? Say you're interested, you're curious now. Well, the best way is to go, get out there, get dirty, and let me know what you think and what you found, and tell your friends. So it's still a landscape that's not well known. A lot of maps, it just looks like a blank spot on the map. So you can help by getting out there. Keeping track of water sources. So using our water chart and tracking sources on that will really help others after you understand what they can find. Water is the most important thing out there. Go to town, drink a beer, eat some nachos. There's been a lot of curiosity out there from these small communities. It's not a traditional backpacking place in Southeastern Oregon, but a lot of trail supporters have come along after they have these interesting conversations with hikers, and they're like, what are you doing? I cannot fathom what you just did. And so a lot of the trail culture and community is developing around you going to town and having a conversation with the person next to you. You can also become a member of the Oregon Natural Desert Association. So the Oregon Desert Trail is a project of ONDA. So becoming a member, there are lots of other benefits, but knowing that you're helping this long distance route and our conservation work. So you can head to our website if you're interested in becoming a member and learn more there. So I just wanted to highlight, I open it up to questions, a few upcoming online events that we have that you might be interested in. Next week, we have the Intro to the Art and Science of Wildlife Tracking. So this is something I don't know a lot about, and I'm really interested to learn more. When you see the tracks, who's making them, all of that. So that should be really interesting. And then we have our Wild and Scenic Film Festival. This is a online event, October 1st. A lot of great films, some that ONDA was a part of making, other really exciting recreation and conservation films. And then this one is one that I'll be giving on October 14th, is Minimizing Risk and Maximizing Reward, How to Recreate Safely in Oregon's High Desert. This will be a really interesting one. I'm joined by two others. Stacy needed to get rescued. She hurt herself very badly when she was in the Owyhee region, so she had to call search and rescue. So she's going to share her perspective of being on that end. And then Tomas was bike packing in the Heart Mountain region and ended up finding someone who needed rescuing. And so he was a part of a rescue. And so really interesting perspectives. And also we get into a lot of tips for being safe out there. So that is the conclusion of the presentation. You can find, again, all the resources on our website. And this is my email address. You're welcome to shoot me any questions, or if you're looking for suggestions or advice, we can do that too. So I will stop sharing.
Yeah, so feel free to put your questions in Q&A or in chat. I was really impressed with your deflation and inflating of your pack raft. How long does it take to like inflate it?
It's just a few minutes, less if you fill the tubes with gear. But yeah, it's a really smart design. And in fact, it helps the boat paddle with more force through rapids. So it's more stable, actually, the more weight that you put in the tubes. So it's been a lot of fun to use.
That's crazy. I had no idea that that even existed to that point. And that water was pretty impressive.
Yeah, it's so remote, and even in a large raft. I've not done it when there is a lot of water in a raft, but I'd love to go back and see. I know it will look totally different. I've seen some pictures of that Widowmaker rapid, and all of those rocks were underwater. Like you can't see any of those rocks. Instead, they create these huge hydraulics and holes and hazards, which I was just walking under all of that.
That's amazing. Well, it looks like we don't have any questions for you because you answered everything so thoroughly, Renee. So thank you again for coming out and telling us about what it's like to hike and blisters and all. And thank you in the audience for joining us. You can visit DeschutesLibrary.org/calendar for more events. And I'm going to put this link in the chat here of one of the videos that she suggested. One of the hikers had. So it's in the chat if you wanted to look at that video. So have a great afternoon, everyone, and I will send out the recording to everyone who registered so you can share it to other people who might be interested. So thanks.
Thank you, Laurel. Thanks, everyone.